Hey, it's Audrienne, and welcome to another episode of the Photography Made Simple podcast, where I give you tips and tricks to help you take pictures you love and can't wait to share. Now, today I want to answer a question that I recently got from one of my Auto to Awesome students, who was struggling when taking portraits of her daughter, who had just recently got glasses. And every time she was taking her picture, she would get the dreaded glasses glare, where you get reflections from the light onto the lenses of the glasses. Now, even if a family member doesn't wear them, we've all been in the situation where we're taking a group portrait, either of extended family or maybe just friends on a night out, and one or more of the people in the frame are wearing glasses. And we need to do our best to avoid getting glare so that, that subject's eyes doesn't look like this wall of reflections. So that's what today's podcast is all about: how to avoid glasses glares in your photos. So there are two main strategies for taking pictures of people with glasses. The first is to try to avoid getting glare on the glasses in the first place. And if that fails, then we fall back to the second strategy of removing the glare in editing. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have time to studiously remove that glare in editing, especially if there is more than one image. For example, if you've taken multiple photos for a family session, or indeed if a member of your family wears them. So it's a constant occurrence that you'll end up with glasses glare. So I always first look for ways to avoid getting glare onto the glasses in the first place. This is by far the easiest option, not to mention the least time consuming. But let's face it, we won't get it right 100% of the time, which is why it's always useful to have that sneaky backdoor option of removing it in Photoshop. But let's start with the in-camera options first of all. So the first option is just to watch your angle to avoid the glare. So the main thing to bear in mind when it comes to avoiding glasses glare in your photos is the light. Light will always reflect off shiny surfaces. And of course, that's exactly what glasses are. Big, shiny surfaces ripe for picking up reflections and glare. So that's why with all the in-camera only solutions, it's all about paying attention to the light and how the light is hitting our subject. So the first and most important thing to keep in mind is the angle of your subject to the light source. Now, when photographing people, we can use front light. That's especially useful for beauty portraits, or 45 or even 90-degree light, which gives in that bit of shadowing to add depth and dimension, but also give us great light on our subject. Now, regardless of whether we use front or side light, as photographers, we are always taught from the beginning to watch out for the catch lights because we always want to see some in our subject's eyes. Now, unfortunately, when someone is wearing glasses, it's the glass that picks up the light instead of the eyes. So instead of gorgeous, sparkly eyes that are full of light and life, you get a wall of reflections instead. That's why when your subject is wearing glasses, we need to forget everything we've learned so far about getting light into your subject's eyes and instead avoid a situation where you would get catch lights. So you can absolutely still light your subject with front or directional light, but you need to pay attention to where the light is falling and the reflections that the glasses are picking up. You then need to change the angle. Usually it's going to be the direction that your subject is facing. Sometimes it's a change in your shooting position, but most of the time it's just changing the direction of where your subject is facing. Generally speaking, you're going to want to move their head a little bit away from the light to remove the glare. So, for example, instead of having your subject turn slightly toward the window, have them angle their head so that they are turned slightly away from it. Even just asking the subject to dip their chin a little can remove the reflections and glare. So it doesn't have to be a massive change in direction or angle. The key is that you need to pay attention to where the light is hitting the glass and then have your subject turn away from the light until you don't see it anymore. Now, if you want to see some examples of this in action, head on over to the blog post that accompanies this episode, where I have loads of example images for you. Just click down round about where you're listening to this podcast, and I've left a link to it there for you. Okay, so moving on to number 2, and that is actually very closely related to number 1 on our list here, because it's still about the angle of the glasses to the light. But another simple fix of instead of moving your subject's head is that you can have them simply tilt the glasses slightly so that they are not on the same level as your light source. Changing the angle of the glasses but keeping the head in the same position can be enough, just that little tilt, to reduce or remove glasses glare entirely. Now, as a side note, you don't always need to move all of the glare completely. We just want to make sure that there's no glare over the eyeball, where it's so much more difficult to deal with in editing and simply looks more distracting. So even moving the glare to the kind of outer corners of the glasses, so you still have some glare, but it's not there over the eyeball, can, work perfectly well. And you can also find it easier to remove that little bit of glasses glare in editing. Okay, move on now to number 3 and another solution. And yes, this is still all about the angle of the light, is to change the direction of light completely. And instead of using front or side light, change it so that the light is behind your subject, so that you, as a photographer, are shooting into the light. So using backlight will reduce the amount of light hitting the glasses and therefore reduce glasses glare. Now again, normally with backlight, we might look for a reflector, either natural or store-bought, to bounce the light back into our subject's eyes. But when our subject is wearing glasses, this will simply bounce light back into the frames. And again, give us that reflections and glare. So we can either avoid having a reflector completely, or you can go back to number 1 and number 2 on this list, which is to change the angle ever so slightly, or tilt the glasses so that you're removing the glare. Now, using backlight can be a particularly good option for younger children who are not going to pay the blindest bit of attention to you when you ask them to tilt their head or move their glasses a little bit in one direction or another. They'll probably just look at you like you're crazy and run away from you. So I do find that for younger kids, I try and get that, use that backlight so that I don't have to worry about it so much. It can also be great for more lifestyle or documentary style images. Again, you don't want to be continually asking your subject to tilt their head one way or the other or move their head a little bit away from the light source. You want to leave them and get candid style images. Again, using backlight can be great for that. Okay, so that was our sort of in-camera solutions that all dealt with really the light and most importantly, the angle of our subject in relation to the light. But we have another solution in camera, and that is to remove the glasses completely. So if the person that you're photographing doesn't wear glasses all the time, then a really nice simple solution is just to take them off for the portraits. However, if the person always wears glasses, it wouldn't look like a true portrait of them to take them off. So if I saw my mother without glasses, it just looks plain weird. It doesn't really look like her. I would also be really careful of asking people to take their glasses off, especially children, because it can sound like you're saying that they are more attractive without them than with them, which is absolutely not true. But maybe they don't know or understand that it's simply an issue of getting reflections rather than anything else. And it's not something that you can really try and explain too much to a child. So for me, I only go with this option of asking someone to remove the glasses completely if they only wear them sometimes. and also therefore doesn't need them. That's another thing to take into consideration. Sometimes a person just cannot see without their glasses, and especially in the case of children, almost their eyes can start to cross when they don't have their glasses on. So make sure the person doesn't need them. But as I said, only really go with this option if the person who wears them only does so sometimes and doesn't need them. And then I would simply say that I want to mix things up by taking pictures both with and without the glasses so that you have options for both. Now that actually leads me neatly on to the fifth option on our list, which is to do an eye swap by merging two images. Because this one does require a bit of foresight when shooting, because you need to take two pictures of the person, one with glasses and one without. And then you do a swap of the eyes, just like you would do a head swap, so that you're taking the eyes from the image taken without the glasses and merging that with the image taken with the glasses. Did that make sense? So really you're swapping out the eyes from the first image that you took without the glasses and then sort of pasting that and merging that as a composite into the image where you took of the person wearing the glasses. Now this really only works if you take the images in the same spot, in the same lighting, and at the same angle. So you can't merge two images of the same person taken at different times, for example. And for me, this is why this solution isn't the best one if you photograph children. It's unlikely you're going to be able to have your child, especially if they're younger, be in exact same position, in the same lighting, the same spot, etc. So it's not my preferred option, but it is one that's available, particularly if you're photographing adults, say for a headshot, then you can absolutely ask them to do that. Now, the final solution is for those times when you didn't manage to get it right in camera. And remember, that was by either, subtly moving the subject's head in relation to the light, or subtly tilting the glasses so that you reduce the reflections, changing the direction of the light completely and using backlight, or if you didn't manage to get those two images, one wearing the glasses and one without, to merge them together in Photoshop. And that is to edit out the glasses glare by using a mixture of dodge and burn, the healing tool, the patching tool, and the blend modes, usually in Photoshop. Now, if you have removed the majority of the glare when shooting, and most importantly, by making sure when photographing that any reflections don't fall over the eyeball, if they're out to the side and they're not over the eyeball, then it shouldn't be too difficult to remove the remainder, either using Lightroom, or if you need the more advanced pixel editing tools, then doing that in Photoshop. Now, if editing in Photoshop is beyond your capabilities, or you just don't have the patience or time for it, that would be me, then there are retouching services out there that will be able to do this for you for a fee. Now, unfortunately, I don't know how much since I've never used them, but for one photo, it shouldn't be too expensive. But if you have a whole card full of photos, say you were shooting a wedding, then it could get really pricey, which is why it's always better to try to get it right in camera. Now, again, if you go to the blog post that accompanies this podcast, not only will you see some example photos, I've also embedded a video that shows you how to remove the glasses glare using Photoshop. So it's a little bit trickier. It's not something I recommend if you're brand new to Photoshop. And it's definitely not one I recommend if you don't have a lot of time, but you can certainly check that out. Again, just go to the links around where you're listening to this podcast, and I will link to it there and you can go and grab that. Now, there is one final option, and that is to just let perfection go. If you are always photographing someone with glasses, let's say your child, like my Auto to Awesome student, then not every photo has to have glasses glare removed. So if the rest of the photo looks good, then just go with it. All I would try to do is make the glasses glare minimal and not over the eyeball. So maybe not worry about removing it completely, just move it so that it's slightly to the side so that you don't have to worry about it too much. And again, using some things like using backlight and just being aware of where you position your subject in relation to the light. And again, I'm saying if you're doing this every day, it's not going to be a pose shot, but even where you, as an example, you set up an activity like painting, make sure that you set that up in an area where the light is going to be favourable for making sure that you don't get glasses glare in your subject's eyes. So for example, for me, I would do that in my dining room, and I would have my subject's back to the light source, which is the patio doors in my dining room. And therefore I know that I've got backlight, and with very little reflections coming back onto my subject, I know that I'm going to get minimal glasses glare. And there you have it, 6 different ways you can get rid of glasses glare in your photos. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe button, either where you listen to this podcast or on YouTube, so that you don't miss a thing. Now, I've also got loads of resources for you on both shooting and editing over on our website. So visit livesnaplove.com to get more. And again, you'll find a link to it around where you're listening to this podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Photography Made Simple podcast, and I'll catch you next time.